Alright, Cloud Gurus, time to take a peek at the sample app. Now, from an architecture perspective, it looks a bit like this, right? It's got a web front end based on WordPress talking to a MySQL backend. And if you look in the app's repo under MySQL WordPress, the WordPress deployment YAML here, this has got everything we need to know about the WordPress component. Now, I get it, right? If this is new to you, you might be a bit like, what the heck is this? And if that's you, that is totally fine, right? Don't worry, at this point, we're only going to be picking out a few simple networking requirements, right? Nothing else. But as well, right, the sooner you start looking at these manifest files, the better. But I know as well, right, a bunch of you are already cool with them. So let's crack on. The app's got two main components, yeah? WordPress front end, MySQL backend. Well, we're on the front end here, yeah? This is what all the WordPress values are telling us. Anyway, we've got a service here. Now, we'll get into exactly what that is in a second, but think of it for now, right, as a cool bit of Kubernetes networking that lets us create a load balancer and it's listening on port 80. Simple, yeah? So it's tagged as part of the WordPress front end and it's an HTTP load balancer. And this bit under metadata here, name WordPress, this means it'll register the name WordPress with the cluster DNS. So yeah, you can ping it and otherwise reach it using the name. Now again, we'll cover more detail later, but repetition's the mother of learning, so let's quickly mention it now. Services of type load balancer, if you're operating on a public cloud platform where the cloud's own native load balancers are configurable via API, which all of the major ones like AWS, Azure and Google are, then this is going to provision one for you with a public IP or DNS name. So, step back just a second, right? If you're deploying on AWS and this happens to be part of your application config, when Kubernetes instantiates this service object, it's going to talk to AWS and provision a public-facing AWS load balancer. And of course, right, it does all the configuration so that traffic's going to hit the load balancer on the front on port 80, and then out of the back, it's going to balance traffic over pods with these two labels here. Details to follow, remember, but that's the gist. This is all storage stuff, so we'll skip that for now. But the deployment here, right, this tells us how to deploy our WordPress app as pods. Now, there's a ton of cool stuff in here, right? But from a network perspective, all I'm really interested in is this bit down here, container port 80. Okay, this pod's only defining a single container spec, but what it is telling us is that the application inside the container running on this pod is configured to listen on port 80. It's WordPress, yeah? So, I mean, look, we see the image for the container here, a bunch of WordPress config, and then one tiny bit of networking that we're interested in. So if we take the service pit again, right? This is giving us a public load balancer on port 80, and it's tied back to some pods here using labels, meaning the service will proxy traffic to pods with these labels. And look, the pods deployed by this deployment object have got those labels. Cool. Now, this is high level and there's magic going on that we're not showing, okay? But I'm hoping we get the picture. We deploy a bunch of pods down here hosting containers running WordPress on port 80. Then we front it with a service. This time a cloud-native load balancer that gives us a way into our application from the internet. Fabuloso. And you know what? I love this notion of deploying apps from YAML manifest files, right? I mean, this file here, it's got everything that Kubernetes needs to deploy and manage the app. But it's great for documentation as well. A declarative, always up-to-date source of the truth. It's a proper game changer. Anyway, look, enough about requirements now. Let's switch tack a bit and we'll see how Kubernetes pulls it all together.